here have come into the collection because they were originally in a traveling exhibit that the center organized. So a couple of examples of that are this cabinet, which is a moving theater developed by Mark Spheri and an architect, Amy Forsyth. And all these pieces are loose. And what you do is you create your own story of what's going on. And this became an incredible teaching tool at one of the schools that it went to first, because the teachers and the students could move the things around. They could get the students to write stories and talk about it and to create the plays and things that are going on. And in this little drawer is a changing cast of characters. And you know Mark Spheri is famous. He's one of the original multi-axis turners. But he's created all these little figures that go in the plays. So this is, and you can also see the figures in the legs he created. And then when he and Amy were developing this for the Cabinets of Curiosity show, they were faxing back and forth, emailing back and forth, drawing things, talking about their ideas. So the whole front part of the journal is about that. It's the original how do artists collaborate. Sending back and forth, writing, drawing. And then, when this piece went on the road, people who saw it could actually begin to make comments about things. So while this was on tour for a year, there's a record. And I think this
is the second volume.
This is the second book. They filled up the first book. So this is kind of a real testament to how objects can become teaching tools without much trouble at all. This piece here was done by a windsurfer from Canada. And his desire with this piece was to create something that captured the huge movement and power of the waves. And there's a photograph in the collection also of how he did the side, the side texture. Well, he did this on a huge lathe, and it actually comes apart in two pieces. And then the actual imprints in sand inspired his texturing of the side here. So it's the whole feeling of walking in the sand and getting in the water.
What he actually did was he took a casting of the beach, of the sand, and then he built this tracing lathe. Who doesn't know what a tracing lathe is?
Is that what this is?
Yeah. And this lathe traced that pattern onto the piece of wood. And then he cut the disc into sections and reassembled it to create this object.
Oh, I see.
And it was the only object that he made on that lathe.
That's what you call an expensive tool.
Or, as Stephen Hodgman said, that's a piece of artwork in itself. And he curated a show, and the lathe was in the show, not the piece.
That's great. Now, if everybody just turns 180 degrees, let's talk about this piece. This was built by Po Shung Leon, who is an architect from California. And his concept was to go visit Bob Stocksdale, the famous bowl turner, and to capture these remnants after Bob had stopped turning. So Bob's collaboration was letting Po Shung have these remnants of his turning, including this clock that he had never liked, and it was just cast aside in his shop. And Po Shung put this together in a big figure, and the whole figure is articulated. So you can change position, you can look at it different ways, and then on this side, Po Shung created these drawers with samples of every kind of wood that's in the cabinet or that Bob Stocksdale was using. So it's like little archaeology chest.
Could somebody read? No, that's all right. Somebody read that.
Oh, okay.
Read out loud. Somebody's glasses are good.
Henry David Thoreau Wood, Walden Woods, Concord, Massachusetts. The Thoreau Institute is an educational and research center focused on the life, writings, and legacy of Henry David Thoreau.
Now the wood came from a tree that was on that pond. And there's a historical society of trees that collect these trees. And Po Shung felt, if you ever met Bob, he never really talked about how to turn. He talked about how he got the piece of wood. He loved getting pieces from all over the world. And I can imagine Bob saying, boy, could you get me a little thicker piece of wood? I'd love to make a bowl out of it. So it was a real tribute to Bob. And like Tina said, there's a figure there. That's actually the height of Bob. That's supposed to be a portrait of Bob Saxon.
Okay, and here's how it fits the cabinet's theme. It actually opens, and it's a functional cabinet. Is that cool or what? And then, because I'm a landscape architect, I recognize this, and I asked Po Shung if I was hallucinating or if it was really true. If you look at this face on like this, it's actually an architectural plan view. So see how it's a streetscape and you've got lot lines and building lines, and this is how a drawing looks, you know, before everything was drawn on CAD and when you're actually drawing drawings. And I said, is this what you were doing? He said, absolutely. So see, each of these is like a plan view in an urban setting.
Plan view of a house or
Of a city block.
Okay.
Like
Looks like city blocks.
Whole city blocks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, put together in fragments.
Okay.
And it's called Time Standing Still. And this also was in the Cabinets of Curiosities show. And we have that book, and in that book it has pictures of the cabinets, and it has a section called the Genesis, which shows, this was our first show that we asked artists to submit proposals, not finished work. And so it shows their original proposal and their statement, and there's also a CD in there that shows each cabinet in operation.
Okay, if we just twist a little bit this way, right where you are, does anybody know who this piece is and what this person's contribution to the field of wood art is? Okay. This is a piece, an early piece by Mark Lindquist. And you may remember his father was Mel Lindquist, and Mel had his own wonderful version of using roots and very natural pieces of wood. And then his son, who tells the story that he was given his first chainsaw at 8 years old or something like that, something amazing, was emerging into the field about the same time in the 70s as lots of other people that later became famous. So whether it's David Ellsworth as a famous vessel turner, or Bill Hunter, who did the fluted twirly pieces, or other people early on, Mark had a completely different plan in his head. And this is from his Emerging Bowl series. So this is a huge trunk. She's left kind of intact. And with the chainsaw, he's just roughly cut this bowl as if it's an archaeological find. So it suggests mazes and ancient and the patina of age in the green color of the paint. So this was while everybody else was doing perfect, natural, controllable vessels. And then Mark went on to make many totems, lots of other pieces like this, but often using the chainsaw or huge lathes to rough them out and then finish with a chainsaw.
To give you a good point counterpoint, I'll give you another version of this. Now, do you know about core turning, where you core out the bowl so you don't waste the wood, you make another piece from the core? Well, the way Mark would do that was with a chainsaw. He would core out the center piece. And one day he realized that the chainsaw itself left a really interesting pattern inside. So if you look inside, he has systematically taken a chainsaw and creating that pattern on the inside. And I call that a really rough ornamental turning. When you go upstairs, you'll see our ornamental turning collection. But that is a result of Mark pouring out the center of that. He probably made something else from the center. But in the process of taking out the center, he created a unique design. Now, Mark is very, very conscious about the material that he's working with. And I want to ask you, what does that pattern on the rim represent to you? And what do you think, yes, what do you think that represents to Mark? What do you think he's trying to say? Why that pattern?
It's a maze.
It's a maze. Okay, good. Okay, now, what?
Path of life.
Path of life.
But
Okay.
twists and turns in the path of life. So.
Very good. You're all saying very important words. Path of life, channels. Now, look. Now, he did that with a router. Okay? Systematic pattern. Now, look very closely at the outside surface of this trunk. And what do you see?
Oh, the worm.
Right, worm tracks. Life,
Yeah.
the life of the worm eating through that piece of wood. So he said, look, they did their tracking, I'm going to do my tracking. There is a reason behind everything that Mark does.
What's always interesting, though, is depending on your own background, and a lot of turners happen to be from technical backgrounds. It's why you're good with machines and tools and perfection and calipers and thickness and all. Everybody gets a different interpretation, but they're all wonderful layers of all that. Albert, why don't you come in here too? And as we talk about each piece, we know and remember different things about the pieces, okay? So, what do you think these two objects here are?
Okay. Yeah, don't forget, feed your meter. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
So what's the first thing that comes to mind when you see this pair of things? Chairs, right? And the part of this that is chairs is Jack Larimore, who's a local famous artist and educator, and actually designed the cabinets for the study collection upstairs. Used upholstery felt and wound it around and around and around to make the seat of these objects. And then they weren't really intended as chairs. They were intended as meditation benches. So one thing he wanted to do is he was inspired by those old chairs where one person is sitting one way and the other person is sitting the other way, and you can talk, you can whisper in each other's ears, like this. But the other thing is to sit facing this and all the grain so that you can meditate. So they're meant as just kind of a quiet reverse of how we often think that chairs should be used.
Now, remember he told you about the root burls, or how trees are wrapped in burlap? Remember that, sir?
Right, Jack is also a landscape architect. So the original concept for this was it was like a tree that comes wrapped in burlap and the trunk is up.
Right. Now, the backs were turned, but this was a dramatic change for Jack. He attended one of our residency programs. He was a resident furniture maker. When he came to the program, up until that point, he would go to the lumber yard, get milled lumber, already dried, glue it up, stack it up, and then carve it to be an organic form. Okay? He came to the IT program. He saw all these artists. This time it was at the George School. He saw all these artists working with the trees that were falling in the forest at George School and working with the natural cracks in it and the natural forms. And he said, oh my gosh, here I am going to the lumber yard, getting wood, milling it up, or milled up, gluing up to make it look like how it originally was. So his statement for the program was, what I learned at summer camp, wood comes from trees. Okay, so he decided to turn for the first time a log, and these backs are made from a log and split, and that was one of his first things that he did from that experience.
And this is after like 20 years of making furniture, right?
Yep.
But from a certain approach. So isn't it great that our brains keep getting bigger and bigger as we get older? Okay. Now this totem piece was one of the favorite pieces that was just in the exhibition that was curated out of the whole collection. And it was sitting right behind Toby here for 3 months. And no matter what else was in the exhibition, after people saw Michelle Holzethel's hand, her self-portrait holding a bowl, they were all drawn to this. Now, originally when this was made by Connie, Mississippi, she made it to be the wooden form that she could use to cast a big bronze sculpture that was the actual commission for a garden. So this is the original form, which has been cast aside, cast into the center's collection. And since the center moved here in November, it's developed this, or really accented this crack, which is continuing to open.
Right. So something that was intended not to be a piece of artwork has turned into a piece of artwork. But more, the curator and the public have been intrigued by this piece. First of all, by the piece itself, but then they find out that a woman turned that. Well, it was turned out of one, I think it's one tree. She did not care that it was going to crack later. So all she wanted to do was get to the form and then cast it. And then this was actually just wrapped up in her shop, and the patron that commissioned her for the bronze said, "I want to buy the pattern too." So he felt they should go together. So she ended up selling it to him.
Was the carving done in the casting?
No, the carving was done on the wood,
Yeah.
and then it was reflected in the casting.
So when we visited her, we saw her 12-foot lathe, and she works big in general. She's made very big things, egg forms, the black hole that's in the Waterbury collection, and a number. She also has a very different aesthetic because she's really from an art background. She's a painter and came into it from that background. So she makes very sculptural things and has made a series of boxes. There's one in the collection we'll see upstairs.
Why do you say that crack just developed and moved here? Why do you suppose that is?
Well,
it's different.
First of all, there's an old saying, "Wood moves kid." Well, when that was not cured properly, and it's really hard to cure a solid piece of wood that thick.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so eventually it was cracked.
I mean, did you have it a while beforehand, or
We did. It was cracked when we got it,
Yeah,
but it continues to move.
that probably will.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised one day if it was on the floor in 2 pieces. I just want to make sure nothing's around it when it falls. Now, before you go upstairs, we can talk about every single piece, but I want to talk about this piece because who went to the IT program last year? So you may know the story about this. We get a piece from every single resident every year for our permanent collection. This was made by Daniel Forrest, and he has a degree in ceramic and in videography, and he never carved in wood. And what always happens during the first week of the residency program, they expect the list that they sent us of supplies that they want for the program to be there. And at first it was an accident, it didn't show up. But now by design, the material isn't there. And they are pissed. Let me tell you, they are really upset. They say, this program is so disorganized. You asked us a year ago, what do you were selected, what materials do you want? Well, we want to jolt them. We don't want them to necessarily go in the residency program with a set idea of what to do. It's an opportunity to explore new areas. So the material wasn't there. Daniel never worked in wood anyway, so he started looking around, looked on the floor, saw a bunch of shavings on the floor. So he ended up using the shavings, and through Michael DeForest, he learned about the sewing process. And he started sewing them together. He made a piece called Cloud. Then he ended up putting them in different piles and staining them. And then when he moved the shavings off this canvas that was holding this actually a piece of fabric, he noticed that it created a painting. So that became a piece of artwork and inspiration. So the thing that he really made at the end to epitomize this whole residency program, we felt, was this ramp. These individual shavings, and he ran out of shavings. So what do you do when you run out of shavings? He had to learn how to make shavings. Now this is a byproduct of what we do, but he didn't know how to make them. So somebody had to show him how to use a plane or a chisel and a lathe to make shavings. So all these are sewn onto this fabric, then wrapped over this form. And this is the first thing he ever carved in wood, believe it or not. This has captured everybody, his face, and he used taxidermy eyes. But this was just like the piece in the show for him that attracted the most attention. So this became part of our permanent collection.
And I remember the most striking thing he said after the residency was, I have years and years and years of sketchbooks. I've been drawing since I was a kid. And I could never figure out how to make them. But this summer I learned how, because I can see that wood is the way I can actually make the things I've been thinking of all this time. And he came from a ceramics background. And, you know, ceramics wasn't going to do it. So that is the kind of extraordinary thing that happens during ITE. This is a young, brilliant man. He's probably in his early 30s.
And you'll see more of his work. He's actually going to, with somebody else, going to execute a design by Gord Peteron. But our goal is to replace that garage door, the huge metal door there, with two huge double doors. And he's going to be making that. We just need to raise $25,000. But yesterday we got $5,000. So we're now down to $20,000. So, but that's the one link that's stopping this building from being humidity controlled. And once that's in there, we'll be able to borrow from museums and have museum traveling shows that we had in our other space. So anyway, and now Tina's going to take you upstairs.
Yep. I think everyone has figured out